We're going to get started. So welcome to my panel. My name's Audrey, and today we're going to be talking about what happened to girl games. So first we're going to talk about why this panel and also what is a girl game. So my personal definition of a girl game would be a game that's marketed and developed like exclusively for a female audience and marketed exclusively to girls. Some people also call them games for girls or pink games. And basically, why am I doing this panel? I've been gaming since like 2002, 2003-ish, so I have about 20 years of experience, maybe a little more. My first ever systems I got were the pink Game Boy Advance with a copy of Dogs 2 with a Z, and then I got a GameCube with a copy of Bratz Rock Angels, which if you haven't played it, it is one of the top games of all time. And I was basically always playing like the girly games for whatever systems came out. My current profession is I'm a data scientist, and at my work, we do a thing called Geek of the Week, where every week someone on our team kind of just gets to give a presentation about whatever they want for fun as like a team building activity. So this panel was originally kind of created for my job as just like a fun little side project, and then one of my coworkers said, you should submit this to MAGFest because it's about gaming. And so that's how we got here. But I'm a data scientist, so it's kind of a male-dominated field. And a lot of the guys that I work with are, they're into gaming, they're coders, they're software engineers. But they don't know about these games, so like they had to be educated. Yeah, so they didn't play the same games as me growing up, so I basically made this project for my work to teach the guys what they should know about girl games. So first we're gonna look at the early history of what was the first girl game, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly because of the, nobody really agrees on what exactly counts as a girl game, so we're just gonna go over a few examples. So in 1977, there was a arcade company called Exidy that they made this game called Score, and there's very few pictures of this arcade cabinet online because it's like a super niche thing. So these are really bad pictures, but if you can see, there's two like joysticks on the side, and in the middle there's a little slider, and this slider allowed you to select male or female. So this is the first ever game that we know of where you could play as a girl and pick your character to be female. The first playable female character in a video game, and we have no idea what she looked like because no sprites or screenshots or anything of gameplay exists, and there's no like working cabinets known to exist. So if you're one of those people that's into like mysteries or like lost media, this might be like something you want to look into if you want to go down that rabbit hole, but we have no idea what the first female video game character looked like. We just know she was in this game. In 1981, there was a game that was a maze chase game, so kind of similar to Pac-Man, called Ladybug. And if you can see the promotional art and like the art on the arcade cabinet, it showed the Ladybug as a little fairy, so kind of a girl protagonist, but in the actual game, it's just a bug. So you can decide for yourself if you want to count this as a female protagonist. It's kind of up in the air. But it exists. And then, of course, we have to talk about Miss Pac-Man. So this was released in February of 1982, and it was originally made as an enhancement kit for the original like Pac-Man arcade machines. So the original title was Crazy Otto, and it was this weird-looking guy in the middle. And it was an enhancement kit, so it basically was made to like add extra levels, music, and like features to the Pac-Man game. And it was made by a group of students at MIT who got sued because this was very, very not legal. But it did like improve on the original gameplay and like it appealed to a wider demographic. So they ended up working with Midway, who was like the distributor of Pac-Man in the US. And basically their Crazy Otto enhancement kit got turned into the Miss Pac-Man game that like most people know and play today. And it's regarded as one of the top video games of all time. Most people see it as an improvement over the original Pac-Man, and it did draw in like a female audience with the female playable character. In September of 1982, a game called Wabbit was released, and it was made by a female developer named Von Tron. It was for the Atari 2600, and the girl in the screenshot, her name is Billy Sue. So she's the first console game with a named playable female character. So we finally have a protagonist with like an actual name. And it was like a shoot 'em up, a farming sim type of game where you were shooting at rabbits to keep them away from eating your garden. There's a little documentary about this from like the Video Game History Foundation, so I included that at the end, but if you want to go in like a deeper rabbit hole on this, I'm going to have a link to that. But yeah, it was made by a female programmer, and she was developing it with the intention of girls playing it, so I personally would count this as a girl game. And then in 1983, we got Jenny of the Prairie, which was an adventure and survival game where you had to like collect food and stay away from foxes and wolves and things like that. And it was the first PC game that was specifically targeting a young female audience. And then throughout like the mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s, we got a lot of licensed games where they took like an existing IP, so Strawberry Shortcake, Barbie, Cabbage Patch Kids, Little Mermaid, things like that, and they made games out of them. So these aren't necessarily like original characters or like original girl games, but they did exist, taking media that was like made for girls and then turning it into a game. So I would also count these as girl games. In 1985, Yuji Naka, who was the co-creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, he was in training at Sega, and one of the games that he developed during his like training period was called Girls Garden, and it was a little maze adventure game where you would go around a garden and pick flowers and bring them back to your boyfriend or your lover. And this was also a little girl game. It was never released in the US, but it did release in Japan, and yeah, it was just, he developed it. So then, now we're gonna get into the Games for Girls movement. So, what was the most impactful video game release of 1996? So there were a lot of really important games that came out in 1996. Pokemon, Duke Nukem, Civilization 2, Kirby, Super Mario, Resident Evil, Fire Emblem, yeah, Quake, Elder Scrolls, Crash Bandicoot, Persona, Tomb Raider, Mario Kart, and then, you know, but also Barbie fashion designer. So this was the most influential game of 1996. So this was a game where it had like a physical component, a 3D component, and a 2D component. So it was really revolutionary in terms of like, not just girl games, but like video games in general. A lot of retailers didn't know if they were supposed to market this as a game or a toy or both, but you could design clothes for a 2D model of Barbie and pick out different patterns, colors, things like that. And then there would also be a 3D like fashion show element to the game where you could see your clothes modeled in the 3D. And then the game also comes with this fabric that can go in a home printer so that you can actually print out the designs and fold them up like origami and use them for actual Barbie dolls. So it was like very innovative, and it was a huge release in 1996. That's another picture of the kit. So it came with like shoes, accessories, markers, the printable fabric, as well as the game. It was the 9th best selling PC game in 1996, but the most influential. It sold over 600,000 units in the first year. It made $14 million in revenue in 1996. It was the top-selling SKU number for Christmas in 1997, and it sold, this is a quote, it sold more in a shorter time than any other product in history. And in 2023, she finally got her flowers, and she was inducted into the World Video Game Hall of Fame. So then in like the late 90s, we see this sort of pink games movement after the success of Barbie fashion designer. I could have honestly just filled up with this slide with Barbie games if I wanted to, because they were really cranking them out at the time. But we saw Barbie, My Little Pony, American Girl dolls. Laura's Happy Adventures is based off of the Playmobil toys. So these are all based off of either like toy lines or TV, movie. So they're making these games for girls, but they're using these existing IPs that already exist. So we're not really getting any original girl games. They just kind of saw the success of Barbie Fashion Designer, and they wanted to basically copy it. So every single like girly IP just started cranking out games. Then in the late 90s, we also saw this opposite movement of the pink games movement that's kind of called the purple games movement. And there were two companies involved in this. So one is called Her Interactive and one is called Purple Moon. So Her Interactive made Mackenzie & Co., which we'll talk about in a minute, the Vampire Diaries game, and then like every single Nancy Drew game, which they still crank them out to this day. There's a lot of them. And then Purple Moon made the Rocket series, the Secret Path series, and the Starfire Soccer Challenge, which we'll also get into those in a minute. But the idea of the purple games movement is that the pink games movement is like girly IPs, girly games, everything's pink. And then for these purple games, they were like, girls aren't just gonna want something that's like pink and hyper feminine. Like we also have to make games that are targeted for girls, but not necessarily like super pink and super hyper feminine. So like I mentioned before, Her Interactive released their first game, Mackenzie & Co. in 1995. It was like an original IP, and it was a dating sim. In 1996, they released a puzzle adventure game that was based on the Vampire Diaries. And then they released Nancy Drew Secrets Can Kill in 1998, which was also a puzzle adventure game, but that took off, and they have cranked out a Nancy Drew game for every device that has ever existed. They were basically making at least one game a year. There were mobile releases, PC releases. I think there's one that you can literally only play it on a Kindle. Like they released a Nancy Drew game for like every single device. And I think the most recent game came out in like 2023 or 2024, so they're still making games to this day. Now, Purple Moon was founded by Dr. Brenda Laurel. I believe her doctorate's in education, but she surveyed over 10,000 children and 500 parents, and she went to look at like the psychology, the play theory, and the gender. So she was actually trying to do a more scientific approach of like, what do kids want to play and what do their parents want them to play? And she's the one that wanted to start the Purple Games movement. And she actually created original games. So like as you can see on the right, the Rocket series and the Secret Path series, they're not based off of any existing like IP, TV show, movie. They're all original characters. And her games were like visual novels. So they were based on the narrative and like the values. So you played as a kid going through school, and you had to make decisions based on like your friends, activities, things like that. So it was trying to teach kids about like actual problems that they might run into in the real world, and just trying to teach them like good values. The Secret Path series took the characters from the Rocket games, but it focused on sort of like their inner struggles and like things that they struggle with in secret. So like that's why it's called Secret Paths. And you had to help them through different problems in their life. So like I mentioned before, Rocket's New School was a visual novel. It had 250,000 units sold, and it made 1.1 million in December of 1997. And then Secret Paths was a puzzle visual novel where you were trying to help them with kind of their inner problems. It sold 23,000 units in December of 1997, and it was very like critically acclaimed. Now, in 1999, Purple Moon Games files for bankruptcy, so that's basically the end of this Purple Games movement. So now what I wanted to get into, we're taking a little break from gaming, but we will get back to it, is we're gonna talk about tech toys and basically how tech toys influence the development of girl games. So in like the late 90s and the early 2000s, they wanted kids to like learn how to use technology, computers, things like that, because they thought that would help them with their careers and everything in the future. So a lot of toys became a lot more technology based. So we got things like Hit Clips, Video Now, the Pixter, the Leapster, Tamagotchi. Like they were just trying to use a lot more technology and like computer components into the toys that they were marketing to kids. And then one case study I wanted to do is on Girl Tech. So Dr. Janice Swanson founded the company called Girl Tech. She started out as a project manager at a software company, and then she made these two toys called the Talk Boy and the Yak Back. And both of these were like voice recording toys where you could like record yourself and then play it back. And she took the money she made from that and she founded Girl Tech because she wanted girls to be included in this sort of like tech toys movement, and she wanted to make things for girls to play with. And then Girl Tech is the company that we all know and love with the password journal. And then another company that I wanted to do like for the case study is Spy Gear. So they also made these sort of tech toys, but instead of being marketed to girls, they're marketed to boys. So we got things like a spy camera, night vision goggles, laser tripwire, things like that. And just to do a little comparison, the toys are very similar. Like Girl Tech, you have the Bug'em, and then Spy Gear, you have the Spy Bug. It's the same concept. They're just being marketed really differently. Girl Tech has the door pass, and then Spy Gear has the door alarm kit. Girl Tech has the Keep Safe box, and Spy Gear has the Spy Safe. So overall, you can see that they were kind of like really similar, but just marketed differently. And then Girl Tech kind of evolved into where they were not just making tech toys, but kind of like standalone games. So the first one was called Password Puppies, and it was kind of similar to Tamagotchi, where you had a virtual puppy that you could play with it, do like dog shows, tricks, games. And then they also created this thing called Digi Makeover, which is essentially like a Wii U gamepad that you could plug into your TV, and you could take photos with it and do makeovers, different backgrounds, hairstyles for you and your friends. So these are starting to veer out of being like tech toys and actually kind of being like video game-esque experiences. And then we also, in this era, saw a lot of handheld games. So there were like Bratz, Pixel Chicks, Girls Connect, My Life, 20 Questions. So we're starting to see all these releases for girls that like, instead of putting them on consoles, they're just kind of making these handheld toys or like handheld experiences. And then we're also getting into a lot of plug-and-play games like Cheetah Girls, Disney Princess, Hannah Montana, and then of course Dream Life, the one we all know and love. And all of these sort of like handheld games and plug-and-play games played into like the stereotype that like girls don't buy consoles or like girls don't play video games. So if you want to make a game for girls, you're going to have to put it on this sort of like standalone device. So Dream Life released in 2005. Designer's World was the same company as Dream Life, released in 2006. And then Dream Life Superstar released in 2007. So this was kind of like a series of, a pretty successful series of these plug-and-play games. And in this series, you had different like social links, so you could meet up with characters either at school, or if you're playing the Superstar, it would be like, you know, other celebrities. And you could have different dialogues with them. There were different daily activities. If you can see in the bottom left corner, it shows you the sun rising or setting. So you had to try and do as many activities as possible in one day before you run out of time. And then there were also different like social stats and time constraints. So you would get points for different things like fashion, friends, lifestyle, based on the activities that you choose to do. And then there's a calendar to kind of track. So you're trying to get the most points possible within a certain time frame, like before the school year ends. And if any of that sounds familiar to you, it's probably because you've played Persona. So this is another thing where you can see they made it for girls, and then they also just tweaked it a little bit and marketed it for a completely different audience. It's kind of like, can I copy your homework? Sure, just don't make it too similar. So just to do a little recap, Girl Tech was founded in 1995. There was this kind of stereotype that girls don't buy consoles. No. So they started producing a lot of like handheld electronic games and then plug-and-play games, because kind of the stigma was like, if you're gonna make something for girls, you can't put it on a console. It has to be its own thing. So now we're gonna get into the DS era and how the Nintendo DS influenced the development of girl games. So Nintendo was in its flop era. The GameCube really didn't sell well compared to like the PlayStation or the Xbox. So when the Nintendo DS was coming out, Nintendo said, all right, we have to have a different strategy. So instead of going after, it launched in 2004, and they decided they were going to do a market expansion. So instead of marketing to gamers, they were like, we're just going to market to everyone, like with a pulse, essentially. So the Nintendo DS was developed to allow users to play intuitively. So it has the touchpad for like touch inputs. It has the microphone so that you can actually speak into it. So they really made it with the intention of like, even if you've never used a video game before, like you should be able to use this because it really mimics like real life. And then there's a quote from the third president of Nintendo. It's kind of unclear if he said this while he was president or after, but he said, if the DS succeeds, we will rise to heaven, but if it fails, we will sink to hell. So like everything they had was riding on this console. So then with the DS, we kind of get this gaming market expansion where they were like, we can make a DS game about anything. So like if you want to garden, there's a DS game for that. If you want to take the SATs, there's a DS game for that. If you want to do wine tasting, there's a DS game for that. If you want to get fit, there's a DS game for that. If you want to stop smoking, there's a DS game for that. So they really said, like, we are going to market this console to anyone and everyone. And then with this, we see a lot of Nintendo DS games that are not necessarily made for girls, but they're made for like a general audience, and a lot of girls end up playing them. So we get Nintendogs, Cooking Mama, Animal Crossing, Mario Kart, Pokemon. And again, like, I wouldn't necessarily call these girl games because they're not specifically marketed for girls, but they're kind of just marketed like for everyone. Like, we should all be playing them. And that meant that a lot of girls were playing these games and like buying a DS. So in 2006, 44% of Nintendo DS owners were female. We're almost at half. And then Nintendo, in response to this, started releasing like pink consoles and like things that were actually trying to like market to the female audience. And so then we get a lot of girl games on the DS. So we have the Imagine series, the Pet series, and the Style Savvy series are like the three that I want to talk about because I think they're the big ones. So first up, we have the Imagine series. And this was a bunch of simulation games for different careers. They were aimed at girls aged 6 to 14, and they were published by Ubisoft. They came out from 2007 to 2013, and they were on the DS, but also like 3DS, Windows, and some Wii games. And these were made by multiple developers, so there is a very wide range of like quality in terms of the games because there's almost no consistency with this series whatsoever other than the front of the box. So I obviously can't talk about all of them, but I just threw up a few examples. So the first game to ever release was Imagine MasterChef, and it's essentially a Cooking Mama clone. It has a cute art style, like, you know, nothing wrong with it. Imagine Wedding Designer came out about a year later, and in this game, the bride tells you what she wants, and then you have to pick out the things that she likes. So it's one of the ones where it's like there's not a lot of depth to it, maybe not the best game in the series. And then Imagine Ballet Star came out in 2008, and this was actually a Japanese like dating sim that they just said, we're gonna release this in the US as Imagine Ballet Star. So it's again, like there's literally no consistency within these series whatsoever. And when you buy these, like you do not know what you're gonna get because you can see like the difference between the Japanese game cover and the American game cover. Like, I don't know why they did this. Then we also have the Pet series. So these were pet simulation games. They came out for PC, Game Boy, DS, Wii, 3DS, and mobile. And they were released from 1995 to 2014. They've sold over 22 million copies. And there are so many of these. So like we've got dogs, cats, hamsters, bunnies, horses, dog talent show, dolphins, monkeys. We've got Hamster Superstar. We have Endangered Paradise, fantasy pets, tigers. Like literally any pet you could want, there's a pet game for it. But the main one that I want to talk about is the Style Savvy series. So Style Savvy was also known as Girls Mode and Style Boutique, depending on if you're looking at American, Europe, or Japan. It's a business management sim developed by Sin Sophia and published by Nintendo. It was released in 2008 for Japan and 2009 in the US, and then we got 3 sequels, which are all on the 3DS from 2012 to 2015. So in this game, you assist customers, so every customer has their own personality. There's different brands and styles, so girly, basic, feminine, etc. There's inventory management, so you have to balance having a wide variety of clothes with how much can I hold in my stock room. There's character customization that's pretty in-depth. And then there's also shop and apartment decor. So the way that you decorate your shop also influences the amount of customers that, not the amount, but the types of customers that you get. So there's some strategy behind it. And then there's unique characters. This game actually has a story and a continuing storyline throughout the series, and fashion contests. So overall, I think Style Savvy is a really good example of a girl game done well because there's a lot of depth to it. It's when you play in the beginning, it's honestly kind of hard, even as an adult, because you'll have 10 items in your stock room, and then a customer's I want a gothic casual dress, and you're okay, I don't have that. So, but I think this is just a really great example of a series that was developed and marketed for girls. And it's actually an original IP. It's not just something that already existed, and they made a good game. They didn't just try to make a girl game. So then for other DS games, basically any TV show or movie that existed, aimed at girls, also got a corresponding DS game. So we had Bratz, Barbie, Disney Princess, Hannah Montana, Cheetah Girls, American Girl Dolls, High School Musical, Winx Club, Tinkerbell, Monster High, Littlest Pet Shop, Ally and AJ. And then throughout all these games, there's some common themes. So a lot of them will have character customization, dress up, makeup, decor elements, rhythm game elements, either mini games or puzzle games, social and relationship building, exploration, and then a lot of them cater to traditional gender roles, so they'll have things like cooking or taking care of pets. So these are just a couple examples. I couldn't obviously cover every single game, but character customization, decor, rhythm games, mini games, building relationships and exploring, and cooking. I don't know why this isn't loading, sorry. So now we have to talk about Gamergate. I don't want to, but we have to. And I'm going to do a really, really, really quick overview because the amount, it would take a whole panel just to go into this. So I'm barely skimming the surface here. And I know it's it can be a triggering subject, so I'm not trying to go in depth on anything, but I just wanted to give a content warning. But Gamergate happened in 2014, 2015, and it was an online harassment campaign. It was a right-wing backlash against feminism and diversity in gaming, and it was harassment, threats, doxing against women, either in the gaming industry or in the media that were writing about games. And the online misinformation tactics that were developed during Gamergate are still used today, so great. So the industry response to Gamergate, a lot of the companies Electronics or Entertainment Software Association, Activision Blizzard. I just have some quotes thrown up here, but the gist of it is that they said, threats of violence and harassment are wrong. We need to stop harassing people, stop doing awful things, stop tarnishing our reputation. They never really said anything about treating women nicely or including women in the spaces of gaming. They kind of just said stop harassing people, and it was kind of a half-hearted statement to me. I don't know if this was the best response. I have a couple other quotes. So this is from Nintendo and the head of PlayStation, where again, they're basically just saying we don't want you harassing individuals, but they never actually say treat women nicely. It's just kind of a vague quote. And then also Intel pledged to invest $300 million for diversity and inclusivity. support hiring and retaining women, and they were the only one that actually acknowledged women, like in their statement. They said a recent confluence events related to women and underrepresented minorities. So I think that was the best response overall, but it still probably could be better. So then in E3 2015, this was like the first E3 after all of the Gamergate stuff had been in the media. There was an increased number of like female presenters and journalists at this event. And then some of the notable announcements were Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which was the first female playable character in a mainline Assassin's Creed game. And then these are some other games that like featured female protagonists, like Tomb Raider, Horizon Zero Dawn, Mirror's Edge. So a lot of people saw this as like a really good thing in the industry because they were like, we're finally including women in games. Like, this is so great. So my thoughts on this personally are, I think that hiring more women is good. Like, I do not want to discount that. And I also think that adding female protagonists to existing series is good. Like, I'm never going to say no to like having more diversity or like including more, gender representation, race representation, sexuality, anything like that. But where are the girl games? Because they did not say we're going to start making games for girls. They just kind of took series that already exist, like Assassin's Creed, and they were like, yeah, we'll just throw a girl in that one. So I think it's kind of like they just took the easy way out, like very half-hearted. I'm not saying it's bad because it is a step in the right direction, but I don't think that it actually caused any sort of change in the industry as far as like developing games for women, because they just weren't. None of those games, or I won't say none, but they weren't really saying like we're trying to reach a female audience. They just kind of took games that already exist and then added girls to them. So now we have to take a brief look at the 2020s and like how gaming changed in the 2020s. So there was a huge gaming boom in 2020, obviously like because of the pandemic, but the market share like increased. And if you can see this sort of like pinkish red color is social and casual gaming, and that's the demographic that we saw the biggest increase in so far. Just as an example, Among Us, it launched in 2018, but it had this huge spike in popularity in 2020. And some of the reasons that probably led to like this really big spike in popularity is it's a free-to-play game. It's short, so you can just play like a few sessions at a time. It's accessible because you don't need some kind of like crazy PC to run it. You can kind of run it on anything. And then there's also like mobile and console options. So it was just available a wide range of people. We also saw Animal Crossing New Horizons. That graph, the orange line is Nintendo, so there's a huge spike in like the growth when Animal Crossing comes out. So it was released in March 2020, and this game gave us like escapism and a sense of community, and you could do things that you can't do in real life, like you could meet up with friends or your partner in your Animal Crossing island, even though you couldn't leave your house at the time. It sold 46.5 million copies so far, and it's the second best-selling Switch game. It's only behind Mario Kart. And this led to like a huge boost in sales for the Switch, like I mentioned, and it really popularized sort of like casual and cozy gaming. And then this is just another little graph, but like we're seeing this rise in cozy gaming, and it's probably also related to the idea that like we don't necessarily get to have a house anymore or get to have friends anymore, so like we have to do it in video games instead. So now, is there a girl games renaissance upon us? Let's find out. So the first like notable announcement I want to talk about is Dress to Impress, which was on Roblox. So it was released in October of 2023. It was developed by a user that's only known as Gigi, and she supposedly began developing this game when she was 14, and in 2024 she was 17. This game collabed with Charlie XCX in 2024, so it got like a huge sort of boost in like popularity because they're collaborating with like a mainstream pop girly. And then in late 2024, they reached 1 million like concurrent users, and they won a whole bunch of Roblox Innovation Awards for excellence, creative direction, and new experience. So if anyone's like not familiar with Dress to Impress, it's essentially a online game on Roblox where you're given a theme and you have to make outfits that coordinate with the theme in a certain time frame, and then the community will like vote for the top outfits. And it had a huge spike in popularity, especially in like the past year. So I would say this is definitely like bringing girl gaming back to the mainstream. And this is another example of a game where it's like free to play. It does have paid membership options, but I think the fact that it's free to play makes it more accessible, which is also like we can attribute that to why it's so popular. Fashion Dreamer, released in November 2023. It was developed by Sin Sophia, and it's seen as like a spiritual successor to Style Savvy. I have a Style Savvy shaped hole in my heart, and Fashion Dreamer does not fill it. But I don't want to hate on Fashion Dreamer because it is a good game for the right people. I'm just not the target audience. But in this game, you create characters called muses. You can dress up the muses. Depending on if you want to play online or offline, you can either interact with other people's muses or you can interact with like NPCs, and they will give you a suggestion, like I want to wear a red striped shirt or something like that, and you have to build basically an outfit for them based off of the request. You also get a showroom, which is kind of like a little boutique that people can visit your showroom and like your clothes to add them to their inventory. So there is a little bit of that like sort of boutique element, but it's just not the same as Style Savvy. They do monthly events like the Fantasy Fair or the Mermaid Fair so that you can get kind of different outfits every month. There is a gacha element, but it's a free game. Like it's included with the in-game currency. It's not kind of a microtransaction or anything like that. And again, like it has online play, but it's not required. But the game's also not really fun if you're not playing online because you're just dressing up the same NPCs over and over again. This is a good game if all you want to do is like make characters and dress them up, but if you actually want like a management sim or something like Style Savvy, it just doesn't compare. We also saw last year in March 2024 and September 24, there was Princess Peach Showtime and then Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. So these are both like long-running Nintendo series, Mario and Zelda, that fans have been asking for a very long time, like, can I play as Zelda in a game? There was one other game for the DS where you could play as Peach, but there hasn't been another one since. And I don't necessarily think that these were, like, marketed as girl games. I don't think Nintendo tried to push them on girls, but they definitely, like, appeal to a female audience. And I think we kind of see Nintendo sort of dipping their toe back into, like, maybe making girl games again based on how successful these are. So I don't think they're like a full-fledged girl game, but they are important to note because, Nintendo's like a major developer and we're kind of seeing the pendulum swing back towards girl games. And then we have to talk about Infinity Nikki. So this came out December 2024, very recent. It was made by Paper Games or Infold Games. They have like a Chinese name and then the global name. So it's like two different companies, but it's the same company. So before Infinity Nikki, there were predecessors that were all mobile games. So it started in 2013 with Nikki Up to You, and then the most recent release was Shining Nikki. So this is like a very well-established series, but Infinity Nikki was the first time that it came from mobile to being like a PC and a console release as well. And they added like open world elements to it and kind of made like a more like full-fledged game instead of just a dress-up game. So it's available for Android, iOS, PlayStation, and Windows. And it's free to play, but with microtransactions. So this is, again, where we're seeing this sort of like free to play push. The games are a lot more accessible and like can reach a wider audience because they're free to play. And it's a gacha game, so there's definitely some criticism to it because gacha games can be like predatory with their tactics and, giving you like the fear that you're going to miss out on something. So this is a really good game, but if you're a younger girl and you're not necessarily like familiar with the gacha game tactics, it can also be predatory basically. So in Infinity Nikki, there is open world exploration, like I said, puzzles, styling battles. They release new content basically every month. It's pretty accessible because it's free to play. but the gacha elements can be predatory, and it's also online only, so it's not like the DS games, for example, where you can just take them in the car with you or play them on an airplane. So there are definitely some drawbacks to being this like online only game. And then also like it's going to be shut down eventually. We just don't know when. So that's kind of the drawbacks to this game. It has like a lot of creativity and collaboration. So I put an example of on the left is a photo that I took of my Nikki in just like a little sword fighting pose. And then on the right, another user like used my photo and then added themselves to it, so it looks like a little duel or something. I think it's really cute. So there's a lot of opportunities for like being creative and like collaborating with other players. There's very highly detailed fashions. There's a high quality photo mode with so many options. There's new updates and like new outfits every month. And then in December 2024, we hit 20 million downloads, and they got $16 million in profit in their first month. They earned over $1 million just on the first day. And one thing I want to point out is that 70%, I don't know the current statistic, but in 2018, 70% of the employees at this company were female. So I think you can really tell that this is like a game that's like made by women for women, and it's like made with a female gaze in mind. And the CEO of Paper Games has quoted as saying, "It's not that women don't like to play games, but there's no good games for women to play." So I think this is a good example of a company that realizes that there's this like gap in the market where like we need girl games, and they're trying to like fill the void basically. I wanted to talk about Hello Kitty Island Adventure. So this was released in July 2023 as Apple Arcade like mobile game, and it's coming out for PC and console at the end of January, so it's still upcoming. It's a platforming and puzzle game. I've heard people say it's kind of like Breath of the Wild crossed with Animal Crossing, which I don't really know how that works, but so there's going to be like decorating, customizing your character, and this also won Apple Game of the Year in 2024. And I think this is an example of something going in the right direction, because when it was on Apple Arcade, like you needed a subscription to play it, so it kind of plays into like those predatory, subscription services. And now that they're releasing it as a PC and a console release, you can just buy the game and own it. So I think that's sort of taking, the step in the right direction as far as girl games go. It was also nominated as Best Mobile Game at the Games Awards. And then, sorry. One other game that I want to talk about is called Enceladus. This also hasn't come out yet, and I don't know when it's going to come out. It still says TBD on Steam. But it's an arena shooter that's basically inspired by like Y2K dress-up games and flash games. It's a team of 2 developers in Australia, and they're inspired, like I said, old flash and CD-ROM games. So throughout the game, you're like shooting people and then like gathering materials to dress up your character. And I think this is a really good example of like where the industry can go in the future, because shooter games are like targeted towards men. Like that's never been something that's really targeted women. And then they took it and they said, we're going to make a game in this genre, but we're going to make it for the girls. So I think this is an example of like ways to make girl games in the future, or like where the industry could go. So now I want to talk about what can we kind of do to support girl games. So obviously the biggest one is to like vote with your dollars, because if we want to see companies making girl games, then we need to buy girl games. I know, like I said, I think that Infinity Nikki can be kind of like predatory with the gacha system, but I bought the monthly pass for it because I was like, I want to support a developer that's making games targeted towards women, so I'm going to spend my $5 a month or whatever it is because I'm sort of voting for that. So I think just looking for releases that are targeting women, and like if you're interested in it, definitely try to pick it up, because that's the main way that we're going to get more girl games, is if we show that there's like a demand for them. If you do any sort of like streaming, then you can consider streaming girl games and just giving more of a presence there. If you're on any sort of like Reddit groups, I know there's groups called like What Game Should I Buy? Like you can recommend like, I think you should play Style Savvy because it's a really good game. And then if you have any kind of like if you are any type of like content creator or social media, like you can promote girl games like on your platform. Just different ways to get the word out. And then also for cosplay, I included some cosplayers up here that I found on like Instagram or TikTok, but the left and the right are cosplaying as Infinity Nikki, and then the middle are cosplaying as Bratz Rock Angels. But when you're considering like your cosplay lineup for like future conventions, you could maybe consider like doing a character from a girl game. I think we need more Infinity Nikki cosplayers because the outfits in that game are gorgeous and like so detailed that we should all be doing it. And then also for as far as like online community, things like Style Savvy and Fashion Dreamer, there's Discord and Reddit groups. So even though these games, like for example, Style Savvy, we haven't had a new release since like 2015 or so. There's an online community that's keeping the games alive. So the fans will kind of come up with their own ideas. So for example, in the middle, I have someone that is cosplaying as Amy, but like in Style Savvy. So they'll come up with different like cosplay contests or like fashion contests and just kind of do this like fan generated content. Yeah. And basically like trying to add challenge into these older games to kind of keep the game alive and add like a fresh perspective to it. Yeah. And then also as far as collecting and archiving, I know a lot of people that come to MAGFest have some sort of interest in either like their own personal collection of games or like archiving older games. So like when you're thinking about your personal collection, or even like at MAGFest, they have like the museum with like the older games in it. Like you could add girl games to your collection. I don't think the MAGFest museum has any girl games in it. I tried to check, but I haven't seen anything. But just the idea that like these games deserve to be preserved just like anything else. On the top right, I have from when Barbie fashion designer got into the Video Game Hall of Fame. And then this bottom right is called the Femicom Museum, and this was a project that started in 2012 to archive like girl games and girl software. They actually, the creator actually presented at MAGFest in 2019. So there is someone that's like actively working on it, but, oh, hi. Yeah, so there is someone that's actively working on it, but I do think it's just important that like when you're either building your own personal collection or you know, any kind of like curated collection or like archive, girl games deserve to be included just like everyone else. So this is my analysis for what happened to so this is kind of the conclusion or the analysis of what happened to girl games. They have kind of a stigma of being like cash grabs, low budget, low effort, and not really getting very original IPs. AAA game developers are not making girl games, and so we kind of have to rely on like indie game developers. But one thing that we do see is that kind of the aspects that we love in girl games are adopted into like wider gaming culture. So if you played a game like Baldur's Gate and you're like, I love the character customization, that's literally just Bratz Rock Angels. If you played Fire Emblem and you're like, oh my god, I love going on dates, that's literally a girl game. You're just playing a girl game. If you like playing the mini games in Yakuza, that's a girl game. You're playing Hannah Montana. And if you like choosing your skins or you like dressing up your character in like anything, you're just playing Barbie Beauty Boutique. That's a girl game. And then if you like riding around like the open world in Red Dead, you're just playing Barbie Horse Adventure. You're playing a girl game. So in conclusion, yeah. So I just want to say thank you coming out. I can take questions if anyone has any. And then also, I made a link tree that just has some links to different like podcasts or videos because I obviously don't have time to show every video I want to show. I also have ribbons for everyone came to my panel, so you can come up and get a ribbon if you like one. But I can take questions if anyone has any. Yes? I was never really into. I like to play dressupgames.com, and they would give a lot of links to Girls Go Games, but I would never like directly go to that site, so I'm not super familiar with it. Yeah. All right. Yes. I'm not really familiar with it, so I think it kind of just depends on the marketing. My personal opinion is that I think a girl game has to be marketed towards women. So like I don't personally consider like Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley to be girl games because they might have like a really big female player base, but they're not made like they're not marketed as like girls should play this. They're kind of marketed towards anyone. So for my definition of a girl game, I think it really depends on the marketing and like how the company's trying to push it. I'm just not super familiar with the Dream Life Valley, so I would have to look into it.
Yes.
In your opinion, like I know you talked a little bit about like marketing for everyone. Do you think that's really gender neutral marketing? Do you think that that's something that's really like possible in such a, I'll say, male dominated like genre?
Sorry. I think that when the game company like wants something to be gender neutral, they try to make it like as gender neutral as possible because they literally just want everyone to buy it. So even though it is like a male dominated industry, I think it is possible. Yeah. All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. I have ribbons up at the front if anyone wants to take one, because I paused Bratz Rock Angels to be here, and I think everyone else did too.